Okay, I'm going to call this virtual study session to order. Thank you all for being here. Our first order of business is board policies. There are a few that have minor changes and a few that have substantial changes. So, does anybody want to speak on any of these?
So Jeff, I let them know that Dolores was running a little late, so.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Um, with respect to the board policies that I think the chair was just speaking about, these have just gone out to the governance groups and will shortly be posted for public comment. We wanted to see if the board had any particular questions or thoughts while we're soliciting additional input from the different employee organizations, and then expect these will come back to the board depending on the timing of the comments, either at probably the March meeting for approval. But in the meantime, in case the board had any significant input on any of them, we just wanted to make sure there was ample opportunity to consider that before we bring it back to the board for further discussion and a vote.
Well, I didn't see anything that was concerning. I think I'd prefer to let our people have a look at it and give the input.
Yeah, I agree. When I was scanning through them, there wasn't anything that jumped out at me as particularly alarming. But part of the reason we have that review process is they may see things that we don't. So I'd love to see what all that public feedback is.
Okay, I'd like to say something. I'm not quite sure how the review process is working, because from what I recall in the past, Jeff, we did not have a 21-day review on any board policy. When Elaine Simmons came in and did and helped us with the changes, we wrote them up. We said what we wanted, and we voted on them, and that was it.
Hey, Maria, you might be talking about our board bylaws. And am I correct there, Maria? Was that what?
Yes.
Okay, so this we're not going to talk about those right now. We're not going to talk about the board bylaws right now, Maria. We're going to talk about some board policies that are up for change, like board policy 1.25 and some others. That's not on the list that they're asking us to look at today, but how we did board policy 1.25, we presented it. It went to AERC, then it went to faculty, Senate, staff council, all of the different groups. And then after all of those groups talk about those board policies and make suggestions and tweak it, then they put a policy that's been in draft form, and they put it up for all college employees to do a 21-day comment. And that's online. So that's a little bit different. But what you're talking about, I think that's right. When you guys made the changes last year or 2 years ago, whenever that was, to the board bylaws, there was no 21-day comment, because the only people that get to vote on that is the board.
Okay, so you're saying that the policies that we're looking at now are policies that affect the employees, and so they're the ones that get to review them and have a say in them, right?
Right. So there's one on grading, and students' attendance. There's one on admissions and registration. So there's 3 that have no changes, maybe 10 that have minor changes, and then the financial aid has substantive changes. And maybe, Jeff, maybe somebody would want to talk to us. I noticed that in one place, FAFSA was removed from the beginning of that board policy, and then there is a slight mention to it later on. And I'm sure that, the people at the college who know about all of these things, they have the experience and the expertise to make sure that we're writing these where it's going to be beneficial for the college to run smoothly and efficiently. But if they want us to understand, like, why were those substantive changes made, maybe they could just do a quick, if there are federal laws that are requiring it, or, you know, it would just be good to know why those big changes were made.
Sure. And just to, I guess, cover something that was mentioned before, one way to think, so you're right, I think everyone is right. There's a difference in the way the bylaw changes were handled versus these. One way to think about it that helps explain that is the bylaws are the rules the board sets for itself, right? So they really apply entirely or almost entirely to the board. So we don't have the same kind of input process as we do for these kind of policies, as other board members were mentioning, because they affect how different areas of the college actually conduct their business. And so we want to make sure that the people that are affected by them have an opportunity to share their perspective and make sure that we're thinking through all the implications. So as you were saying before, so the short answer to this is I do believe the changes were made to more closely align this with some of the changing federal requirements. But we could certainly have maybe David Donderwitz or someone like that, who's the head of the financial aid office, come in and kind of walk through them so that it's very clear why they were making these particular recommended changes.
Thank you. I did have one other question on board policy 3.32, student attendance and participation. And my concern is, and I might not have read it complete. I mean, I read the whole thing, but I might not have understood it completely. But toward the end, it says that after the drop add period, if a student doesn't attend for 14 calendar days, they will be dropped. And I'm just thinking back to my days as faculty. I taught some 5-week classes. So if the drop add period is the first 3 or 4 days of the class, and somebody doesn't show up for the next 2 weeks, that is, you know, what is that, 40% of the class. And so, you know, a regular 16, 17-week class, if they don't show up the first 2 weeks, I mean, it's still serious, don't get me wrong. But I mean, it's different when they miss, you know, an 12.5% compared to 40% of the class for those courses that aren't offered full term if it's shortened class. So I had some concerns about that. I mean, it's the only one that I have any experience or expertise. I just maybe hope somebody would think about that, because it does matter how long the class is, what the term is. Do we still teach 5-week classes at the college?
No, not very many, if at all. It's 8 weeks. We have the fast track, which that depends on what it is, but we've got the 8 weeks and we have the 14 weeks and 16.
Okay, but even for the 8-week classes, right? If someone misses 2 of 8, it's way different than they miss 2 of 16.
Yes, definitely.
So maybe that might need to be reworded if it's not good enough for those faster paced classes. Do any other board members have any comments or questions on these board policy updates and proposed revisions?
No, the only thing is that you will be posting all the comments, correct?
Yeah, they always do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll
good.
assemble all of the comments into one document that will be posted, and then certainly glad to separately email that to the board just to make it easy for everyone to be able to see the comments.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then moving on to item 2.2, board policy 1.25. I think Dolores wanted to comment on some of that.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Riel. So it's good to see all of you. Greetings from Phoenix. I'm here with AC4 with the different presidents, Arizona Community College presidents and chancellors. So I wanted to talk a little bit about 1.25 in my perspective. And I just appreciate all the work that's been done from the employee groups and management in collaboration. We have 2 very similar versions, version A, which is more the employee group, and version B, which is management. And they're practically identical except for at the very, very end. And I just wanted to comment on my perspective as the leader of management. And one other thing before I start, we did in January, at the beginning of this month, we had a retreat with the board and with leadership and faculty, staff, and administration to talk about shared governance. And it was a retreat, a half-day retreat facilitated by David Borofsky and Eddie Jenna, and it was excellent. I think we can all say the board members were there too. It was a very fruitful discussion on shared governance and collaboration. So I just wanted to start off by thanking everybody for that. So as the interim chancellor and leader of management, I have some comments, and I continue to support our shared governance model that assigns a decision-making authority to the appropriate body or person for different areas of responsibility, and that takes and values the input from all stakeholders, whether it be students, faculty, staff, administrators, or community members as well. And we use that information to make informed decisions, and that is shared governance, taking everybody's input into consideration when making decisions with policies, et cetera. I feel that in our current system, the board has the critical responsibility to make decisions about the strategic direction, the overall framework of the college, and to make sure that the goals of the college are accomplished. And the board also has a critical oversight role to hold the college accountable, and that includes the chancellor. Hold that person, whoever it is, to hold that person accountable, making sure that the policies are applied and that the respective team members are accomplishing the goals that have been set and achieving those. So the chancellor and the administration are responsible and accountable for determining how the college will achieve those goals. I see more the board as seeing the big picture, the what, and the why, while administration or management does the how. That's the operations, not the board. The board is as I said, the what and the why, and then we in turn follow the strategic direction of the board and make those things happen. So I see ourselves as subject matter experts who have been hired for specific areas to oversee and to make sure we collaborate with our teams and get things done as they need to be. And then the board holds the chancellor accountable through the chancellor's goals, through key metrics, updating the board members, whoever's in the seat of the chancellor. So the version of BP 1.25 recommended by management aligns with the values of our shared governance model. And once all of the input from the stakeholders has been considered and reflected in our version of 1.25, then the chancellor or their designee is responsible to make the best decisions of the institution. And this puts the final decisions and day-to-day responsibilities on those at the college, the individuals who've been hired and charged with the management and oversight of college operations, as I mentioned, the subject matter experts. So, and I think we have that currently. We have an excellent employee group with AERC, with All College Council. All College Council has included students, faculty, staff, administrators. AERC has the leaders in faculty, staff, and administration as well. And there are a couple of things I wanted to share, and I don't know if it's Andrea, if you're going to help me share. Could you please show the spreadsheet, the AERC spreadsheet that's tracked?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. So this is an excellent way of tracking the different resolutions or the work that AERC has been doing. And AERC is all the employee groups that they meet regularly. So once that opens up, we can take a look at it.
Can you see it?
No, we see your file.
Yes.
At least I can only see the file. I don't see
No,
the
I see
actual
the file.
image.
Okay, give me a second.
So you'll see all the wonderful work that they've been doing and in collaboration. And you'll see that the majority, it seems like everything is going well. So once we get that image, we can see that.
It's showing I'm sharing. Glenn, can you help me with this one? Do you have a backup copy that maybe you can share for some reason?
You're sharing, but we can only see your
You
file.
have to open up that tab, that specific tab again.
Double click it.
Yeah, I
Andrea?
did. It's open for
Andrea?
me. Yes.
Andrea, I had the same problem yesterday when I was presenting to the League of Women Voters of Arizona. And when in Zoom, when you click to share screen, they give you options what you want to share. And so you have to click on the document that you want to share, not, there you go.
There we go. There you go. Okay, so there's a drop-down menu if we can move that. So you can see all the different resolutions that the team has talked about. Thank you. And then slide it down, you can see what's gone through 21 comment. I mean, it's a fabulous way of tracking it. I want to get to the part where we can see how things were done well, with it, what kind of like a ranking there is. Keep sliding over, please. There we go. Okay. So see the little in green, and then there's a red one. So those are tracking about how successful the work was in AERC. And you see there's one that was difficult, but the rest were either well, or if you scroll down, you'll see some that are okay. And so, but that's part of the process, right? The employee groups get together, they discuss the issues, the policies in depth, with the co-chairs of the group. And then as a result, that's the result of their work. So we can stop sharing there. Thank you, Andrea. So that's just an example of how I think the group is working well. So I guess I'm wondering what it is, the issue that we're trying to solve. Maybe it's something from the past, but not necessarily for the future. So I think things are going well right now. The other thing I wanted to share with you too is that I did talk to our HLC liaison, Dr. Linnea Stenson, and also to our HLC consultant, Sandy Veltri. And they both feel that, I mean, this is good work that we've done with the two versions, but that the authority should be given to the chancellor or president, it depends on the institution, that the board gives that authority. The board has the overarching strategic direction, as I mentioned, and then give that the authority to the chancellor, whoever that is, to make that to make the final decision because of their collaboration and work with the stakeholders. So if we also take a look at the other Arizona College presidents and chancellors, I think we have a chart there that we can share, Andrea. You can put that up about what, because I wanted to know, what are the other colleges doing in the state of Arizona? What is their stance on this? Is it the board that decides, makes the final decision, or is it their president or chancellor?
Glenn,
Andrea,
can you help again with that, please? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I know it's tricky. I'm in a different environment here too, and unable to share my screen.
Andrea, what's the file name for that?
It's a chart. I can't remember the name.
Yeah, it's called, oh, hold on one second.
So while you're looking for that, I can chat a little bit more. So we know that we don't want to be.
I don't have that ability.
It's a chart. Maybe you can go on mute, please. So as I was saying, what's important to remember is that the board not get into the operations of things, and that's a standard practice from HLC. And so what I wanted to share is that, for example, I think it was the last board meeting or a couple board meetings ago, there was discussion about the HR committee, advisory committee, and the external relations and enrollment committee. And it seemed like it was too operational for the board members to be a part of it. And so it was decided amongst the board members that they would no longer be a part of it, but that the college would take care of those issues and update the board, of course, periodically. And so that's an example of, because if you do go with version A, there's going to be a lot that's operational that will be going to you a lot. So, but that's why we have the people working at the college who are the subject matter experts that can take care of that and then share and update you as needed. So I saw something in the chat. Let's see what. Oh, okay, great. So anyway, well, I can tell you verbally while they're looking for it. Verbally, so we looked at the various Arizona community colleges, and it's only one that has the board making the final decision. All the others are either the president or the chancellor that makes the final decision. So that's what that chart was showing. And that's okay if we don't show it.
And which college is it that allows the board to decide?
It's Maricopa Community College, and it's different in the sense that the Maricopa board approves faculty hiring and the board approves staff and adjunct faculty hiring. So it's kind of split, but all the other ones are that the board has it.
Yeah. So
yeah, Arizona.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Okay. Well, as we all know, we would not have gotten into this problem had our leadership in the past not been so dictatorial and so controlling. It's not that we want to have the final decision on things, that are disciplinary or raises or just looking into things, but we need to be aware of them because we want people to be treated fairly. I'm saying that, have demoting somebody for whatever reason and having to take a $26,000 cut in pay. There's nowhere in this country that that's acceptable. Nowhere. And nobody stood up for that. And is that the right thing to do? So in my view, I think the new people are doing a great job in evaluating things and trying to be fair. But all we're not trying to run and be involved in all this, because it comes down to the chancellor making the decision, and only if and when they don't agree can it go to the next level. Because if it's agreed upon within all its members, then hopefully it won't come to us. Isn't that the way you read it, Teresa?
Yes, I have some comments too, but I'm gonna wait until Dolores is done.
Okay.
Okay, I'm almost done. The other piece, and thank you, Board Member Garcia, for mentioning that. But that's why it's crucial for the board in identifying when you hire the new chancellor, the long-term chancellor, that it's someone that you trust and someone that you feel can do the job and hold that person accountable. So that, because I know we're talking about past things, but we're now looking at the future. So I think it's important as you look for a chancellor, what it is that the characteristics that you're looking for. And then just the last thing I wanted to mention about the Higher Learning Commission, and we won't show it on the screen because I think it's too difficult. So Andrea, you can stop sharing that. I wanted to mention core components 2A, 2C, and 2.5C. I do have a printed version, so maybe I can read quickly to you. So 2C is the governing board of the institution is autonomous to make decisions in the best interest of the institution in compliance with board policies and to ensure the institution's integrity. And 2C5 says the governing board delegates day-to-day management of the institution to the institution's administration and expects the institution's faculty to oversee academic matters. Then the last thing I'll quote is from Assumed Practices. And it's over here. I wanted to mention the relevant one here, and that's under assume practice A9. The governing board has the authority to approve the annual budget and to engage and dismiss the chief executive officer. So again, it's the budget and then the person that reports to them directly, who's the chancellor, interim or long-term permanent chancellor. So with that, I just wanted to share my thoughts with you. I know we'll have a robust discussion, and it's important because this is an important topic to discuss. And I know that we'll have the vote in February. So I wanted to ask you if there's anything that I can do or that my team can do to help answer questions or any additional information that you need prior to the vote in February. So, okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to say that the ODR is still not fixed. People are still, we have a history of not giving people due process. And I, for one, cannot accept that continued pattern. And I think it's going to take a while for you or whoever comes in to fix that. There's still retaliation going on. I mean, we heard it in our meetings. So I want to do what's right for the college, and that's the only reason I'm in here. Autonomous to do my job. I'm not influenced by anybody except myself to ensure that in my mind, I'm doing the just thing for all. It's like I used to tell the chancellor, if you can't do it for all, you don't do it for one, and vice versa. Very simple. So I think, I got to say that I really felt comfortable with the meeting that we had with Eddie, Jenna, and Dave Borowski, because they're a great source in helping us. And I also believe that our new board, that they're doing what they need to do. And I sincerely appreciate them. It's a lot more open. It's not retaliatory, because nobody wants that. And and we should be professionals, bottom line. So I still feel that there's still other things that need to be taken care of, and so I would have to accept version A. That's my feeling, and I'll stop.
I have a question for my clarification. I don't know, Board Member Garcia or maybe Jeff or Dolores. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what BP 1.25 does, but it seems to me that this only brings, in the scenario, the things we brought to the board, the only thing it really covers is policies and procedures. So the kinds of things that Maria was raising around, like disagreements and disciplinary action or whatever, that wouldn't be applicable in here, right? Maybe I'm misunderstanding, or maybe it's broader than I thought it was, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding it right.
Well, I think you can look at it a couple of ways. When people have been dismissed, and I think that's what Maria was talking about, that is a procedure, right? There's a specific procedure that whole thing has to go through. And, just the fact that we're still hearing from these same people concerned that their civil rights haven't been honored and respected. But you're right. Firing a person isn't what this board policy 1.25 talks about at all, right? It's just the procedures and the policies for the working situation of our employees. Yeah.
So in that scenario, like if there were a disagreement, hypothetically, what would be brought to us in that scenario would just be the disagreement about the language and the procedure. It wouldn't actually be a disagreement about whether the procedure had been applied to a particular situation, because those are different. I just want to make sure that I'm differentiating that correctly, because I think the only thing that would be brought to us would be like the written procedure. We would not be seeing anything having to do with like employee discipline or whatever in terms of how the procedure is actually applied.
Yeah. So, and I mean, just like, I'm not 100% sure that this is an example of what you're talking about. But when I was an employee, we had like 197 days of accountability, and it was contiguous, day one all the way through the day of graduation. And now I heard last year that they had days of accountability and they stopped. And then there was maybe one day that you weren't being paid because it wasn't a day of accountability. But the next day was graduation, which was a day of accountability. And so some people might say that, you know, when you're paying somebody for a job, and to say we need you to work all of these days, but we're not going to pay you for this middle day in between. If I'm accurate on that, that might be a contentious thing that they would want to discuss and, you know, compromise and get it worked out well. The thing is that if this doesn't come, I mean, the reason we were elected to be on this position is because we have 5 voices, 5 opinions, 5 people that are willing to listen to the situation and the outcome, the possible outcome, compared to one person making the decision. And you know, I mean, I think that that's got to be worth something. That, you know, we are elected to do this job. We're elected to follow state laws, and that's why Maricopa Community College does the contracts. I think Chancellor Duran Serta mentioned that they you know, do each of those. The reasons they see those contracts and they approve the individual contracts is because it's a state, you know, it's a state mandate that the board shall do this, right? Now, when we give authority to the chancellor to do something, we are giving away what we are required by law to do. And we're saying, okay, Chancellor, you or your designee take it over, right?
So, Teresa, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but we lost Miss Garcia a couple minutes ago. So she's missing a lot of this, and I think she needs to hear it.
Okay.
Can you give her just a minute to get back on?
You bet.
Thanks.
Hasn't the weather in Tucson been lovely the last 4 days? Oh my goodness.
Gorgeous.
Although my phone tells me the rain and the 50 degrees are coming back towards the end of the week. So
Oh, no.
I've been using all my powers of positive energy, you know, wishing and hoping for good weather. My niece is getting married on Sunday the 4th. And so it's an outdoor wedding. So we, you know, a week ago, it did not look good. But the last couple of times I've been checking, it says it's going to be sunny that day, cold but sunny. So that's a good trade-off.
Well, congratulations to your niece.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited for her.
Miss Garcia is here.
Okay, great. So anyway, I think, do any other board members want to comment before I say my piece?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Wade.
I thought I understood this before we all started talking. Now I'm not so sure. I think Greg brings up some legitimate points. If somebody were to ask me to explain the parameters of what falls within this policy and what the policy governs, I don't think I could answer that question. Maybe it would help me more if we could talk about the operational decisions that are within the policy and those that are outside the policy, similar to the question that Greg answered. And I kind of would like to talk about specifics if we have the time. In other words, a disagreement in employee discipline, in or out. A person thinking that they had their rights violated, is that in or out? An interpretation of a policy by a department head through the chancellor's office, is that in or out? And if it's in, does that mean we're making the final decision? And if it's out, does that mean the chancellor makes the final decision? So I'm really kind of confused about what the parameters are that this policy addresses.
So I know Jeff Sylvan and Aubrey Conover are on the line, and both of them are very well schooled in this topic, so they could answer those 4 questions that you just asked.
Yeah, I can give it a shot. So I think the way to think about it is, in the context, especially of AERC, we are looking at a policy. We're not looking at what happened to individual X, other than if a concern is brought forward about how something is applied, we take a look at the policy and say, is there something in the policy that we need to change to make sure it's being interpreted correctly by all those involved? And so we would work through that policy and make sure that it's very clear the steps that should be taken so that both employees and the people interpreting that policy see it in the same vein. So what would happen in this case is if it came to you all, it would be the policy that would be coming to you. So for example, one that we've had lots of conversations that I like to bring up is whether or not employees should wear name badges. There are different thoughts on that subject, whether or not that should be required by employees to do so. Currently, the policy is that they are required to wear the name badges when they're on campus. If someone did not follow that policy and was held accountable by their supervisor, that would not come to you. But if the employee groups wanted to come forward and say, we don't agree with this policy, we want it changed, so wearing the name badges is an optional thing, that would then come to the board if they took on that oversight role of policy. In the case of the application of our discipline process, our code of conduct, an individual who was unhappy with how they were treated within that process would not come through this procedure. They would work through our appeals process within the college to have that addressed. However, if someone said, I think the way that we do discipline needs an additional step within policy that allows things to be dealt with at a different level, that would be brought to AERC. We would work through it and determine whether or not another level should be added. And if there was disagreement between the management and the employee groups, that policy as a whole with the options of whether or not to add another step would be brought forward, if that makes sense.
So a follow-up question to that, do I hear you correctly, Aubrey? The board would not be hearing individual cases.
Correct.
And what happens when the employee feels that the AERC is not representing them and they have a disagreement with that representative group?
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm not aware of any, so we have never had an opportunity that I'm aware of where we have had a complete disagreement with an employee. Now, we have had some issues come to us where part of our role is to say, thank you for bringing this to us, but this is really doesn't fall under policies and procedures. And we give them resources and direct them to the right outlet where they can maybe appeal individual decision or something along those lines. Now, we sometimes have disagreements within the employee groups and we try and talk through them and come to consensus. Usually there's consensus amongst things, but at some point, if we got to a point where we couldn't agree, not specifically between the employee group and management, but let's say full-time faculty don't agree with staff or even amongst them, and we couldn't come to an agreement or a consensus, that also, if things were to change, would come to the board. Right now, the different information, as with a policy where it's a disagreement between management and employees, all would go to the decision maker, the administrator. That too would all go to the decision maker or administrator, or in this case, if we were to shift to the board.
So for example, if that name badge example you used were to go like this, the employee goes to the employee representative group, says, I don't think I want to wear mine upside down, and I don't think I think I should be allowed to do that. And the employee group says, no, really, that's a good policy. You need to comply. And then the employee says, no, wait a minute. I think I should be able to go talk to the board.
That would probably not fall under this procedure. Now, they might come to
Wait,
public comment.
wait, you don't have the rest of the question.
Oh,
Who
sorry.
makes the decision who the employee goes to? Next step.
That's already a policy. I mean, there is a policy. If you have a disagreement about how you were treated, and it's not always, it's not always that you got in trouble, right? It could be that your class was canceled and you were, made to take this class, right? And if there's a disagreement or whatever it is, there's a procedure of who you talk to first, and it goes up. It's usually as a faculty member, it was our department chair or our dean. If they couldn't solve it for us, then it was escalated, and it could go to, the AERC is, I think, where it would go now. No, Jeff's shaking his head.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
If I might, I think we're mixing,
No, you might not.
mixing together again.
I want the floor. I don't think you came close to answering my question, because you've gone back talking to a department head. I'm talking about what happens when the employee has a disagreement with the employee representative group and decides that they need to be heard by the board. Who makes the decision on whether or not they will be heard by the board? Not the department head. That's something that doesn't even come into this. That's not the question I'm asking. Does this policy address that?
Yeah, well, sort of. So let's say an employee says, here's the current policy. I don't think that's the right policy. We should change the language, like in your example, right? The employee could propose that idea to the chancellor's office or the unit responsible for that area and say, I think you should make this change in policy. Regardless of whether AERC agrees with me, the administrator would consider that. If the administrator and AERC both agree that's not an idea we're going to advance, then the employee's ability to get the policy change would be every employee can write to the board members, they could show up at public comment, and they would pitch their proposal to the board directly.
So whose job would it be to interpret this policy to an employee in that situation?
So that's why I think we're mixing things up. What AERC works on and what BP 1.25 is about the development of policy and procedure language, the application of that language, the implementation, how it applies in a specific situation is up to the relevant supervisor or decision maker, with one caveat. The employee handbook says that the interpretation of the provisions in the employee handbook is ultimately up to the chief human resources officer.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that if an employee believes that their rights have been violated, or they've been treated in an inhumane manner, or something like that, this policy doesn't handle that, and therefore the employee cannot go to the board. The board does not get involved in that conversation. I want to make sure everybody hears this interpretation. If somebody comes to a board member or writes us a letter saying, I was mistreated, and I didn't get my day in court, that doesn't come to us under this provision in the policy. Am I hearing that?
Well, yes. I mean, that's how it's been for the last year. They don't come to us, right? It's not our place to talk to employees about, specific things. That's the administration's job to take care of it. But board policy 1.25 is not that. Board policy 1.25 is talking about a structure where employees have this shared governance activity through AERC, and that's that organization that has that committee that has a bunch of different people from all different levels in the college. All of the different work groups are involved in there, and they work and they collaborate and they make these decisions. It used to be called meet and confer, and that was back in the days prior to 2013 when the unions at the college, the PCCEA, AFSCME, and ACES, where they were given the right to negotiate on all employees' parts. So it was like I heard, well, anyway, I won't say that, but so it was a negotiation between those groups and an administrative team designated by the chancellor. And they worked and they came together and they did their best bet thing. And then when they finalized it, or even if they didn't finalize it, that product came to the board just for final approval. It was a board decision. Back, I think it was in 2015, that stopped. And when that stopped, unions have not been the negotiating power. Now, mind you, there are a lot of amazing people in these unions. That spreadsheet that Dolores showed you, that was designed by Michaela Hayes, one of my fellow math faculty members. And she did it. She designed that because there were all sorts of things that were not getting done, that were not coming to completion, that were not being successful. They would spin their wheels in these meetings, and so much was talked about and worked on. Anyway, that was purely Michaela Hayes working hours and hours and hours to figure out how to do that spreadsheet. By the way, just as an aside, she wanted to present it as one of the things for one of these bellwether awards or one of these awards, and the college turned her down, which I thought was amazing considering so many different groups are using this spreadsheet now. But
so, Teresa, what you just said had nothing to do with my question.
But what you said, Wade, about if somebody is disagreeing with the union and the employee group, and can they come to the board? There is no disagreeing with the union because the union doesn't get to say what happens in any way, shape, or form, except for different union members' participation in AERC.
So I'll ask this question again. So the board is not going to hold, it sounds like the AERC is somewhat of a hearing officer.
Yep.
Group, and their decision is somewhat final as far as the employee is concerned. But I'll ask this question again because I'm having trouble understanding it. So please bear with me. The board will not be hearing a concern from any employee on any topic unless they agree at some point in time that the board policy is incorrect. The board policy is incorrect.
So remember, employees can always come to you, whether it be public comment or not. But in terms of the structure of how this is done, the policy would be the piece that would come to the board for action. If an employee comes to public comment and complains about a policy or how it's interpreted, the board can always direct the chancellor to please take a look at this, follow up on this concern. But this BP 1.25 is looking at the policy itself, how it's structured, how it's worded. Does it need to change on the policy level, not how it's been interpreted in one individual's case?
I heard that. I don't read that into it, but we've had 3 or 4 people give me an interpretation, and I hope this stays so that it's consistent, because the policy, the way I read it, doesn't say that. So then when that gets to the board, is there a requirement for the board to hear that?
To hear a policy change?
From an employee?
If
what I hear you saying is no.
Correct. If an employee has a concern about how they were treated within a policy that is not designed to come to the board, we have an appeals process and other techniques within the institution that does not preclude them from coming to public comment or writing a letter to you all, but the structure is structured in a way that it should not come to the board.
So I'm talking about ultimate decision-making authority, I'm not talking about public comment or anything along those lines. So then one step further, if the employee were to come to the board outside of this process, according to our own policy, the board would not hear that person other than their official statement.
Correct.
Correct? Anybody?
Yes, that
That
is
is
correct.
correct.
You are correct.
That is correct.
Right,
So
so
then,
if,
so then what the board would say to the employees, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Well, and they could say, they could, if an employee came with a concern, whether it be in public comment or in a letter, and the board received that, it would probably, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, would be appropriate for that concern to be shared with the chancellor, so she or he could direct it to the appropriate investigatory administrator to make sure that all policies and procedures were followed. The board would not make a decision and say, you are correct, I'm going to reinstate you at this level, or whatever the case may be.
Okay,
right,
okay.
Well,
the distinction that board member McLean, I think, is trying to make is accurate. So if BP 1.25 is changed the way that the employee representatives to AERC are requesting, then final decisions about what language goes in a policy or procedure would come to the board. Disagreements about how that policy was applied to a specific employee would not come to the board. BP 1.25 is about the development of policy language or procedure language, not about the application to a specific employee.
But Jeff, it's not coming to the board. The policy language, the procedure language is not coming to the board if there's been a consensus, if AERC has decided on it.
Right, but to board member McLean's point, the final decision maker, if the change is adopted, is the board, because if there's not disagreement, it will change who makes the final decision. If the employee group version is adopted by the board, then the board will be the final decision maker when there is a disagreement about what language should go into a policy or procedure.
let me state something. And I could be wrong, but listen to this. Okay. So an employee has a problem. It goes to the right channels. People see it, AERC and so forth. All the members get together. And yet that resolution is considered unfair, but that was the decision that was made. And it's being promoted by the leadership and the directors. And the employee isn't happy because policy really wasn't followed for everybody, like fairly. I mean, there are instances in this college right now where some people are treated better than others. I guess, we're not supposed to know about all that stuff, but I think what we're trying to get to at the very end of this, policies that we have need to be applied to everybody, and everybody needs to abide by them, and they need to be fair, and all employees need to be treated fairly. I think that's what we want.
Yeah, I think we're sort of getting away from what board policy 1.25 is. So board policy 1.25 is the document that has the policies and procedures that show working conditions and roles and responsibilities for different employee groups, right? That's what the document that we're going to be talking about is. So what happens is the difference between the two versions, they're both the same. AERC, all of the different employee groups talk about problems, talk about policies, change things, make them better, do all that sort of stuff. They try to negotiate this policies and procedures, the faculty handbook. I'm sure there's a staff handbook, there's all sorts of things like that. What's going to happen? The only difference, there's a disagreement. Either the chancellor makes the decision or the board makes the decision. There's no disagreement. Either the chancellor is going to approve it or the board's going to approve it. The difference between these two options in my mind is when it comes before the board, it is not our part to nitpick and do all the little things. So we're going to take the advice of the AERC group, and if they agree, we're just going to say, yay, we agree too. If there is disagreements, we're going to listen to the two different groups say, sort of like what we're doing right here with the A version and the B version, right? And then we're going to come to, after hearing comments and hearing ideas, we're going to come to our decision as a board of what we're going to do, as will the chancellor. So it's the same thing. The difference is we were elected to do this job. If we give authority, if we delegate our authority to the chancellor, we're giving away what we were elected to do to the chancellor. So let me just mention a few things real quick. Dolores talked about there is a procedure for making sure that the chancellor does what it is the board wants to have happen, right? I'm going to say that that does not work very well at the college. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it when we get to our board, midterm board assessment. But, and just a couple of quick things. This board policy 1.25 has taken way too long. It should have been done within 6 months. And the fact that it's almost going to be an entire year before we vote this thing one way or the other shows that when the board says something, it doesn't happen quickly. We had the same little problem with the search committee for the search firm to find a chancellor. It was supposed to be 3 to 5 weeks, and it didn't even start until 7 or 8 weeks out. Anyway, I'm tired of people weaponizing HLC. We had that really nasty letter from former board members where they weaponized HLC, and I sort of feel that the administrators who are supporting the administrator version are also weaponizing HLC. When we had the governing board be the final sign-off authority on this for decades, it was never a problem with HLC. It wasn't a problem for HLC where Maricopa, the only community college that we are very similar to. We're not similar to a small rural college. We are a big community college. So I don't think that, even though it's been mentioned by many people that HLC is against this, they can't be against it. There are colleges and universities across the nation where the board does this final approval. Lastly, the college always, well, there are other educational institutions. Many of the elementary, K through 12 school districts do it this way. Maricopa does it this way. JTED, Pima County JTED does it this way. And the reason it goes to the board and not to the CEO is because we're not a business. We're an educational institution. And we know that oftentimes having, just like AERC, when they work through and figure out these problems, they come to a better agreement instead of just one person making the decision. And it's the same thing for these two different versions. Would you rather a board that's elected to do this job, negotiate and figure it out and do what they feel is best? Or do you want one person doing what they feel is best? Okay, I'm done talking. Any other board comments?
I have some more.
Okay.
I disagreed with a considerable amount of the things you just said. But I guess right now, I want to reiterate, and specifically, Maria, I want you to hear me say this policy does not have the board ensuring that every employee is treated the same. This policy does not have disgruntled employees coming before the board for relief. It doesn't have the ability of an employee to complain about the supervisor or department in the college and have the board have a hearing and make a determination on whether or not there's value to the concern. So you need to understand that, Maria, because a lot of the things you said tonight, this policy is not necessarily designed to address that.
So, in other words, unfair terminations will not be part of it. Correct?
That's what I hear.
Or demotions?
Teresa, you're muted.
You. Board policy 1.25 does not talk about unfair terminations. So it's not in that manual or that idea, right? What goes in here is the basic procedures and policies of how we expect our employees to work, the roles and responsibilities we expect them to undertake and to do with due diligence, and that sort of thing. It doesn't, what we're talking about here in board policy 1.25, it's not about hiring and firing people. Those are other board policies. Those are other APs. So what we're talking about here is just AERC is figuring out this package of policies and procedures that affect employees and employee groups. Version A says, if there's any disagreements, it'll go before the board, for the board to hear the different sides and the different angles, for the board to make a decision. Version B says the chancellor can do whatever she or he wants. They may listen to AERC, but they don't have to, because it doesn't say that in there, right? It's the board. What was it?
But
the board
whoever
may-
decides, they make it due to a well-informed process, and that's the AERC's input, right? So whether it's the chancellor or the board, it's with the input of AERC. So it's not just, for example, the chancellor or interim chancellor, it's not just that one person making a decision. It's a well-informed decision by the input of AERC.
Got it.
Well, that, I think that goes without saying, right? That's why we have AERC. They're the experts. They may know, I hate to say it, but they may know better than the board, and they may know better than the chancellor what's happening in those kind of areas, right? That's why we have those, that's why we have shared governance, right? When you have shared governance, instead of having one person be the authority, it's like a patriarchal father, right? Instead of having that one guy says that this is how we're going to do it because I'm the dad. My dad was like that, by the way. Instead, when you have a shared governance model or more fair to employee groups, right? It's that the work and the energy and the discussions that they put in matter, and they matter in the final outcome. When it's coming to the board, that will be the case. AERC's decisions, whether they always agree or whether they don't. Let's say they all agree, right? It can go to the chancellor in version B, and if something isn't what that person wants, that chancellor could change that. As a board, we can't do that, right? We're taking the recommendations of AERC and we're going with one. If there's a disagreement, we're going to be listening to their presentations to us. Anyway, we'll have to figure this all out before next 3 weeks from now, when we have our board meeting, where this will be live.
So I have one more comment, I think, and then a question. So in that scenario, one thing that differentiates the AERC with the management side is that AERC technically, legally, fiduciarily does not have any accountability. and the chancellor and management do. So the shared decision making is not necessarily a level playing field. And then my question is, let me give a scenario that may or may not occur. So everybody gets together, they go through the process, and it comes down to a disagreement in meet and confer on salary and fringe benefits. And the AERC's position is we want a 3% raise. The management position is we're prepared to give you a 2% raise. The AERC's position is we want spousal partner insurance. Management says we can't afford it. Then that would come and sit on the board table, and we would make the decision on those two issues. Is that correct? Is that a correct scenario?
No, because I think what you're referring to are more budgetary. So you're making those decisions separately from this through the budget recommendations that David B puts forth and the decisions that you all make on that. So the only one that potentially could come to you, but it still would be a budgetary. So the spousal, let's say when we, oh yeah, so here's a great example. When we expanded the tuition
how about
waiver.
You use, Aubrey, how about you use my example?
Well, so the spousal, so the wage example, whether or not there's a disagreement in percentages, would not come through AERC because that's not a policy or procedure. That is a compensation benefit that's tied up in the budgetary process that you all decide on at that high level.
So salary negotiations is not in meet and confer?
No, since we have switched AERC, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, but it is, Aubrey. I mean, so AERC does provide input into the budget process related to compensation, but regardless of which version of BP 1.25 you pick, the final decision about what the college is going to spend on payroll and benefits will go to the board. That's how we do it now. It would continue regardless of the changes. So they're not treated exactly the same in AERC, in fairness to Aubrey, but AERC, and that's one of the changes we made last year, actually, to make sure, because AERC didn't feel comfortable they were having enough opportunity to input into the compensation part of the budget. So we actually changed that to increase that. But they do provide input into compensation, but because it ultimately affects the budget of the college, those decisions do go to the board now, and they would continue to do so regardless of which version the board approves.
Because even if AERC agreed to like a 20% raise, because we're all feeling generous with each other, that's not going to stick unless the Board of Governors says, yes, we've found that money and we are on board.
Real quick question, just to clarify. When Dr. McLean was talking about this, he said AERC versus administration, AERC versus administration a couple of times. That's not the case at all. AERC is a committee of employees from all of the different. Aubrey, you chair it. You're a co-chair with. Is it Michaela Hayes? Is the faculty co-chair?
Mm-hmm.
And so that committee is made up of people from all of the different work strata classes. I don't know what we call work groups, right? So it's not, AERC is not against the administration ever. My assumption is that, Aubrey, you get your marching orders from the chancellor. The chancellor would say, hey, Aubrey, I want you to focus on this. I want you to try to make sure everybody understands this from the administrations. I would assume that Dave B tells you his own things from the business side. Jeff tells you things from the legal side, right? So you are being informed from the administration. So it's not an us versus them. The AERC is the group that works collaboratively, cooperatively to find the best decision for the college.
Yeah, and that's why really honestly it works so well, because really everyone's interests are the same direction. We may slightly disagree about how to get there sometimes, but that is the focus. And there could be, and has been, not very often, once a blue moon, disagreement between employee groups. And so we try and work through those, and again, almost always come to consensus, but there may be a time, if this were to shift, that differing views brought before you all. Management may have a version, full-time faculty may have a version, staff may have a version. There may be different interests that are presented to you with pluses and minuses. But yes, you're absolutely right. We are all in it together trying to make the best possible outcome.
Okay, I have a comment to my fellow board members. Just so we understand, it's fine and dandy that David B tells, I wouldn't want to be you, Aubrey. It sounds like you're the in the court with lots of responsibility. But so we all understand each other. That budget process, either in the middle, the end, the beginning, the middle, or the end, revolves around taxation and student tuition. And this vote on this board member is going to be to not make any monetary decisions until there's a consensus with the board on those two issues, student tuition and taxation. And so the process can move down the road, but last year I acquiesced and voted for a budget that required a taxation increase and a student tuition increase, and that will not happen again with me. Because I think the revenue determinations have to be made before the expenditure determinations. Those are going to be tough decisions. And the meet and confer process may or may not involve those conversations, but the only ones that can truly make decisions on that is the 5 board members.
Yep.
And just to stress Jeff's point, one of the things that we really focused on this year, because there was concern last year, is to make sure that all the employee groups have multiple opportunities to meet with David B, to understand where we are financially currently, what options might be out there for them to express their priorities relative to their different employee groups, what they would like to see if funds are available, and understanding the bigger picture of what we're facing with the big decisions that you all have in these areas. So those conversations have been going on. They will continue to go on, and we will try and get you all, we will get you all a summary of their thoughts and inputs so that you understand where they're coming from as part of your conversations.
Any other board members want to comment?
Right size the organization.
Okay, hearing no others, we'll move on to section 2.3, the board's mid-year assessment.
One last comment.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One last comment. And a couple of the words that came out and stood out. It comes back to us in reference to having the full consensus, but more important, being informed. I know that both the AERC refers to the issues and concerns that we have. They're done before it reaches to us, and I think the policies you mentioned, Mrs. Real, that the policies are there for the check and balances that they need to meet for any employee that's disgruntled or having issues and concerns. I think one of the things that we need to look at that was mentioned a while ago is the big picture. The big picture, as mentioned a while ago, we need to look at, and the two main big pictures are the taxes, but also the budget in reference to what's going to be the impacts in reference to moving forward. But more important, what have we done for our employees? We've done quite a bit this last time around, but what can we do more for our students as well too? I think that's one of the areas that I feel that we need to look at as well too, regarding the services and programs as well. One of the big things that we'll come back to it, and I'll be very verbal about it in reference to the biggest items that we have that we need to look at.
Yeah.
In order to really pass a budget that's going to be fair for everybody. Not only promoting the whole community college, but also promoting our students as well too.
Thank you. Okay. So, Andrea, and can you guys post that mid-year assessment document?
Andrea, what's showing is the chart of the Arizona Community Colleges.
Yeah,
It's not.
I sent them the one we're supposed to pull up. I'm waiting for them to do that.
Give me 1 second.
And you know what, I mean, the board, I emailed it to you last week. Basically, it was just to talk about, you know, how effective we've been as a board, areas that were good and areas where we need improvement. And so what I thought was we could all write a comment, one positive and one comment that needs work for each of those areas that the AACCT, there we go, thank you. So the board functions are listed there. Say one positive comment in one area where you think we need to show more growth or more work. That's for that first section for the board functions. And if you could scroll down to the second part of the assessment, these were our goals for this 23-24, and also say one positive thing that we're doing right in the correct direction, and one that we can work harder on or we need to do more. Sadly, I was talking to one other board member and I said, you know, I sort of feel that not a lot has been accomplished on the board goals. And so, you know, maybe one thing that we need to do is we might want to, you know, let how we hear about the chancellor's goals, each board meeting, something's talked about. Maybe we need to go through these and do the same thing for us, where we talk about what has happened in these goals and what hasn't happened yet and where we need to go and where we need to start. But how does that sound to all the board members, doing a one positive comment, you know, like a strength, you know, a strength and then a weakness, or I can't remember what those other words were for SWOT were, but you know, a strength and an opportunity and a weakness and a threat, you know, those sort of things. What do you think? Any comments on that?
Risa,
Yes.
I would be willing to do that. And then in regards to the reporting on the governing board goals, I don't think we're capable of doing that.
Okay.
We don't have the resources, and we don't speak in a common voice. That's for sure. But
yeah,
I'm wondering if maybe we couldn't ask the chancellor to have someone, not necessarily her, but someone say, do a little bit of homework for us, and I'll pick on number 4, capital plan, and say, the board hasn't done anything.
right.
Not
Well, we
met, not, pardon me?
We can't do anything on that.
Well, that's my point, Maria. So to have somebody else, you know, say to us, I think we have to operationalize each of these goals in some way, shape, or form. You know, a report on capital assets, or the 3 to 5 year capital asset plan for review, or recommendation that needs guidance from the board on future strategic plan, how it interacts with capital plan. I mean, something like that, which unless one of us wants to step up and do a lot of work and may or may not have any expertise in this area, maybe a staff member could help us do this.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point. None of these were, you know, a job description for a volunteer employee, right? These are all job descriptions of things that administration and faculty and staff have to do at the college. 100% of these, in my opinion, right? None of these were, you know, things that we were going to do. So I think that either we need to revisit these because, you know, accreditation, for example. The college is doing a lot of things on accreditation, right? We're having mock trials. They've been having their HLC roundtables. That's not the name that they're calling it, but I think we did one in August, September, October, November, December, January. Well, January's. The next one is February 15th, I believe. So, the college has been doing a lot of things to make sure we are, get top-notch marks on the HLC visit. So I think number 2 is fine, but I don't think any of the other board goals, I don't think much has been done on any of these. That was just my thought.
I mean, I think there's more to be done, but I don't know that I would say I would agree that we haven't done. I mean, like that first one, like we did the interim chancellor. It didn't always happen on the timeline that we wanted, but we do have those things. There is a plan. It's in motion. We're in the process of reviewing and revising board policies. We just did that today. So it seems like we're making progress on 1. I mean, 2, I think the way it's written is referencing what we as individuals on the board are going to do, as opposed to what the college is going to do. And we've started that. We had we had at least 1 or 2 presentations at the board meetings around HLC. I know we've been scheduling meetings coming up through the year. We have that HLC conference trip where some of us are participating. I think all of that falls under number 2. I mean, for enrollment goals, I don't know that we've necessarily established a goal, but I could certainly say that we're monitoring enrollment. I mean, that's how the dashboards work. That's how those reports that we get on a regular basis work. So maybe we need to talk about what the goal actually is, for where we want to see it, as opposed to just increasing. But anyway, I mean, I think there has been work done on a number of these. I agree with what was said about number 4. I don't know that we've really done a lot about capital assets, but my hope is that's kind of part of this budgetary process we're launching into now, where we'll talk about, capital plan and capital assets. And then, number 5, the progress towards the accomplishment. I mean, I think part of that is the chancellor's goals, but also kind of the long-term strategic planning that we're going to have to launch into. So I don't know. I guess I feel like we are making progress on a number of these. They're not done, but I'm not as pessimistic about it, I guess.
Well, I have been, because I think that, the timelines that we would have liked to have happened didn't happen. And I'm really concerned that we're not going to get this job done before my term ends.
So, as far as doing the comments, what do you think? Like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, think about them and get them to Andrea by the end of February.
All right.
And Andrea, would that be all right if we just send our comments to you?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay with the board members?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, then moving on to section 3.1, a motion to elect 2 board members to serve on the Chancellor's Search Advisory Committee. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Which 2 people do you want to nominate, Maria?
Well, I would like to be on the committee, but I think, and I'll leave it up to the other board members, but I think that you should be on it. And I think Wade has a lot of experience, and if he can put the time into it, or if he wants to share it with me, it's up to him. Luis, are you interested at all?
I wish I could say yes, but no, I can't.
Okay.
I'm not able right now.
I would, I would support Wade, because I think that he has a lot of experience and he knows what to look for. He kind of keeps us straight.
So I guess
I do like you, Wade.
Thank you, Maria.
And Greg, do you have any desire to be on that committee?
No, although I have some thoughts about in general about us having people on that committee.
Okay, so I think the motion that we heard was for me and Wade to be on the committee. And is there a second?
I heard Maria and Wade.
Maria.
Second,
Maria, did you want me and Wade to be on the committee?
yes,
Okay,
prefer you both.
okay. So now to discuss that, Greg, I think we'd like to hear what you have to say. Wade mentioned to me that that this isn't going to be, we're not going to be the chair of this committee. We're not going to be telling everybody what to do. We're there to listen and to observe and to make sure that that it's happening in a timely manner, right? Unlike the prior one. And just to be able to come back to the board to tell all of you what we heard and who they're talking to, that sort of thing.
And that's fair. I don't think we should be on that committee at all. I think that, we are the final decision-making committee, all 5 of us. It's not like that search committee is going to make a decision that we're not approving or that we're not narrowing down. And so I genuinely see it doing more harm than good for us to participate in that committee. I think we should stay sort of an objective second step. And if we want to record the sessions like we did with the search committee and have the option for board members to listen to the presentations and do all of that. But I think the risk, whether intentional or inadvertent, of us, putting our thumb on the scales for that committee one way or the other to operate, I think that is worse than the other things that are describing. And so I do not think that any of us should participate in the actual committee itself. I think we should wait for the committee to make its recommendation, and then we are involved as the final decision makers on ultimately making the hire.
I'm going to add a little bit to what Greg said. In the past, the board was involved in the selection of the chancellor. And I know that this last time when this happened, a lot of people that were on the committee left because they were upset about what was happening. And I'm specifically talking about the Native Americans, because they did not appreciate what was going on. And in the end, there was one board member that moved to bring Lee in and advocated and did everything they could. So by me telling you that, what he's saying is that these kind of things could happen again. And we'll have to decide what the best way is. And that's all. That's all I can bring up.
Luis?
I agree that we need to really be very careful in reference to our positions. Like they mentioned a while ago, is we are the ultimate decision makers in reference to hiring the next chancellor, whoever it may be, him or her. But I think it's going to be a little bit it's not going to be looking too good for any of us if we're involved in the process. That's what I'm trying to say. I think it's going to be a kind of a risk.
I think Greg brings up some good concerns, and I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't ask our search consultant for advice on this.
It's a good idea.
What they've seen in the past as far as what's been a positive and perhaps a negative in regards to the perceptions of the outside community looking in.
What has been the practice as well too.
Yeah, so I mean, we're paying them good money. Maybe they should advise us on this.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke with the board chair from Foothills De Anza Community College. We all know that college, right? They took Lee Lambert. Anyway, their board members, all of them were on the committee. And at that point, when he was talking to me, he said, you know, I just want to remind you that this is solely the board's responsibility to choose the best possible candidate. And so from my perspective, especially having experienced what we experienced since the end of October, I do think it's necessary that we are on that committee. We don't have to talk. And I know that, you know, you think, oh, Teresa's not going to be able to do that. But I do think that if we are not on that committee, the timeline's out of our hands. The number of people that they interview are out of our hands. Where they advertise out of our hands. Whereas if we're on that committee and we hear something come up, you know, we don't have to make our opinion known in that committee, but we can talk to the people that we're hiring, right? They're working for us. They're working for the board. They're not working for that committee. And I just think the fiasco that we had with this last, I think you guys always say I'm being naive about money. I think we're being very naive that it'll go without a hitch if we're not aware of what's going on.
I think though, and I appreciate that concern, Teresa, and I share it. I don't think we have to be on the committee to do that. I mean, I think that we can make a motion and pass it that says the committee has to have its 3 final recommendations or whatever by X date. And then, you know, so it comes to us, and then once we have those recommendations, we can call those colleges and do all those things. It doesn't require us to be on the committee that's making those recommendations to do all of that vetting. I mean, we should. I think that's a step in the process. I just worry that even well-intentioned, that our participation in the committee itself will somehow bias or influence the folks who are there to try to make otherwise objective recommendations to us. Like I said, and we can have an honest disagreement on where we think the risks lie. And I think your heart's in the right place. I just think we can do that without having also have those risks.
Thank you. I just want to point out that we did give the college a 3 to 5 week timeline. And Wade did say we wanted between 3 and 6 firms that we were going to look at. And none of us would have known at all that nothing had happened if I hadn't called my friend for another reason. I needed to decline a dinner invitation. And I said, oh, by the way, how's it going? And she said nothing had happened. And that was December 1st. So we said in October, had I not made that phone call, we wouldn't have found out for the next maybe month or so. And all I'm saying is Maria and Luis and I want this to be done with this 5 board members. We want to find this person before, you know, the November election. And there's a chance that it won't happen if the same kind of shenanigans happen. And I think we're being derelict in our duties if we don't participate. Anyway, anybody else want to say anything?
Do we make a motion?
You already did, so I'll call for the vote.
Okay.
All in favor to have Teresa and Wade be non-voting members on this committee, be there just to observe and to hear and to bring back to the board what's happening, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so 3, 4, and 2 against.
4 and 2 against.
3
4.
yay ayes and 2 nays. Wade, I appreciate your you were the one that suggested this the last board meeting, that we needed people on the committee. So since you are saying nay, would you rather not be on the committee? Should we put Maria on instead of you?
Well, first I'd like to say that I do keep an open mind most of the time. And
Oh,
Greg
yeah.
Greg brought up some good concerns that I honestly hadn't thought about. I over the years, I've learned that if you're going to delegate, you have to delegate. And that's what we have done with these committees, this committee. And it's a real cross representation of our community. And I'm thinking no matter who represents us, that there has to be a comment made to the committee that we're in an oversight role so we can report back versus a participatory role that we're going to be included in the conversations. So maybe we need to define those positions as observers or ex officio or something like that, if that's what the board has decided to do.
That's
Okay.
fair.
So, but Wade, do you want to be that one person in the ex officio non-voting member? Or would you rather?
If that's what the board wants, I'll do it.
All right. You're in.
Okay.
Thank you, Maria.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else for the good of the cause? Okay, then we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
Teresa, call me.